Dr. Ethan Rowe was the town's trusted healer, and Nurse Lila Hart his loyal partner, until the day Claire, Ethan's wife, was found unconscious in the ICU, with injuries no one could explain. What secret were they hiding behind closed hospital doors, and how far would they go to keep the truth buried? In the quiet town of Pineville, where everyone knew each other's names and secrets rarely stayed buried for long, the Rowes were seen as the model couple. Dr. Ethan Rowe was the kind of man people trusted with their lives, literally. At just 39, he was the youngest attending physician at Pineville General Hospital. He had a clean reputation, a sharp mind, and a reassuring presence that calmed even the most anxious patients. His tall figure, calm voice, and methodical way of working made him the doctor people requested by name. Claire Rowe, his wife of 11 years, was just as admired. She taught second grade at Pineville Elementary and was known for her kindness and patience, often volunteering for after-school programs and community events. She baked cookies for fundraisers, remembered her students' birthdays, and was always the first to offer help when someone in the neighborhood needed it. The Rowes weren't just respected, they were adored. Their house stood on the corner of Maple Lane and Redfern Drive, with its perfectly trimmed hedges and blue shutters that matched the flower beds in the spring. Every Halloween, Claire decorated the yard with handmade ghosts, and at Christmas their lights were the talk of the block. People waved when they saw them walk hand in hand on weekends or laughed at the way Ethan kissed Claire's forehead before heading to work. But even in small towns, perfection is sometimes a disguise. No one thought to question why Claire had stopped attending neighborhood gatherings over the last few months. She would cancel at the last minute with a vague excuse, a headache, a school meeting, the flu. Those who asked were told she was just tired, that teaching had taken its toll. She was burning out, Ethan had said once, shaking his head sympathetically. Most accepted that. After all, everyone trusted him. Inside the hospital, Ethan's life appeared equally perfect, but those who paid attention might have noticed small, unusual patterns, like how often Nurse Lila Hart worked the same shifts as him, how many late nights she volunteered for, always the ones where Ethan was listed on call. Lila had transferred from another hospital in the city just under a year ago. She was young, clever, and fast-moving, the kind of nurse who knew what a doctor needed before he asked. Some said she was ambitious, others whispered that she was too close to Dr. Rowe. They were often seen walking down the hospital corridor with their heads bent close, deep in conversation. At first, people assumed it was professional. After all, the ICU demanded tight coordination, but when Lila started laughing at things no one else heard, or when Ethan's hand brushed her shoulder just a little too long, the murmurs began. Still, nothing could be proven, and no one dared to accuse a man like Dr. Rowe, not without real evidence. Then came the night when everything changed. It was a regular Wednesday evening in March, cloudy and cool. Ethan was on an overnight shift in the ICU. Claire was supposed to be home, planning the next day's lesson. The following morning, her car was still in the driveway, her porch light was still on, but she wasn't in the house. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter. Her favorite sweater, the one she always wore around the house, was neatly folded on the living room armchair. A coffee mug sat in the sink, half full. The house was silent, untouched, and still. Neighbors thought nothing of it at first, but by midday concern began to grow. A teacher missing school was rare, especially Claire, who prided herself on her perfect attendance. A wellness check was called in, and when the police arrived, they found no signs of violence, no signs of a break-in, nothing disturbed, nothing missing, except Claire. And one other thing, something that would only raise more questions. The home security camera above the front door, usually blinking red with each passing car, had gone completely dark. The memory card had been removed. No one knew it yet, but Claire's disappearance would uncover a chain of events far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. And at the center of it all were two people who once swore to protect lives. But sometimes the most trusted faces hide the darkest intentions. The morning after Claire disappeared, Pineville awoke to an uneasy silence that seemed heavier than the usual quiet. Word spread quickly through the town. Claire Rowe was missing. At first, people hoped she had simply gone for a long walk, or to visit a friend unexpectedly. but as hours passed without a word from her, the hope began to fade. Detective Ray Mallory arrived at the Rowe residence late that morning, a man hardened by years of seeing the worst of human nature. He stepped carefully through the front door, noting how untouched the house was. The living room looked exactly as it had the day before, Claire's knitting basket still on the coffee table, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen counter, and shoes neatly placed by the door. No signs of struggle, no clues left behind. The missing security camera card caught his attention immediately. Someone had deliberately removed it, an act so calculated it spoke volumes. It wasn't the work of a random intruder. Whoever was involved knew exactly how to erase their traces. Ethan Rowe was the first person to be questioned. He seemed composed, almost too composed, when he told the officers about his overnight shift. He insisted he had seen Claire the night before when he returned home early in the evening, but that was the last time. His calm demeanor unsettled Detective Mallory. There was something about Ethan's expression, a flicker of something unspoken, a shadow beneath the surface that didn't add up. Meanwhile, neighbors recalled seeing strange things. One elderly woman mentioned hearing muffled noises late that night, but when she looked out, no one was there. Another neighbor saw a black sedan parked near the Rowe house just before midnight, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. The police found no registration for the car in town records. At the hospital, Nurse Lila Hart was noticeably quiet. She had always been friendly and upbeat, but now there was a tension about her, furtive glances, quick steps down the hallway, avoiding eye contact. Some coworkers whispered that she had been especially close to Ethan recently, spending more time together than seemed necessary. Detective Mallory requested hospital logs, and discovered that Ethan and Lila had been working the same late shifts for weeks. Each time, Ethan's schedule indicated night duty, Lila's matched. It was an unusual pattern, but not enough on its own to suggest anything illegal. The pressure on the hospital staff grew. Rumors swirled around the corridors like smoke. Had Claire been in the hospital recently? Was her absence connected to the ICU, where both Ethan and Lila spent so many hours? As the days stretched into evening, a call came from the hospital's emergency department. A woman had been admitted unconscious, found by hikers near the edge of town. The description was vague, but the woman's condition was serious. Unresponsive, swollen face, no ID, no memory. The patient was rushed to ICU room 306 under close observation. When Dr. Rowe and Nurse Hart arrived at the ICU, both seemed unusually tense. Ethan didn't show his usual calm authority, and Lila's hands trembled as she prepared the room. The medical team worked quickly but cautiously. Something about the patient's injuries was troubling. Detective Mallory pushed for more information. The woman's fingerprints had been deliberately altered, scrubbed clean to erase her identity. She had bruises inconsistent with a fall or accident. It looked like she had been attacked. The hospital staff tried to maintain silence, but the tension was palpable. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide who this woman was and what had happened to her. The detective suspected a connection to Claire's disappearance, but without proof. It was just another mystery piece on a puzzling board. The hospital's intern, a young man with sharp eyes, quietly took a photo of the patient. Using the limited databases available, he ran the image through missing persons records overnight. The result shocked him. The woman was Claire Rowe. The news spread fast. Claire was alive, but barely. Her return should have been a moment of relief, but instead it deepened the mystery. How had she ended up unconscious so far from home? Who had attacked her? And more importantly, what secrets were hiding behind the smiles of the people she once trusted most? The quiet town of Pineville suddenly felt like a cage, filled with shadows and whispers no one wanted to confront. As Claire lay silent in ICU room 306, the truth began to unravel, and no one would be safe from what it revealed. The moment Claire was admitted to ICU room 306, a strange energy seemed to ripple through the hospital's hall. The usually steady rhythm of beeping monitors and hushed voices was punctuated by glances stolen between staff members, whispers that stopped abruptly when someone entered the room, and an invisible tension thick enough to choke. No one knew what exactly had happened to her, only that she was alive, and that was both a miracle and a puzzle. Claire's face was swollen and bruised, almost unrecognizable. Her eyes, when they fluttered open for a brief moment, held confusion and fear. The nurses worked around the clock, but their care was cautious, almost clinical in a way that suggested they were hiding their own unease. The ICU was designed for healing, but in this case, it felt more like a cage holding a fragile secret. Dr. Ethan Rowe was assigned to oversee Claire's care. His presence in the room was unsettling to some staff. He moved with a quiet urgency, but his eyes were clouded, unreadable. The doctor who had been so confident just days before now seemed burdened by something heavier than medicine. Nurse Lila Hart stayed close, managing Claire's IVs and medications, yet her usual calm was replaced by an odd nervousness. Detective Ray Mallory was not welcome in the hospital. The administration was wary of police involvement in patient care, especially with such a high-profile doctor on staff. But Mallory knew this case was no ordinary disappearance. The pieces were scattered, but something about the way Ethan and Lila acted made him certain they knew more than they let on. The forensic team ran tests on Claire's blood and tissues, searching for toxins or drugs that might explain her condition. The results came back delayed, leaving the hospital staff restless. Meanwhile, the detective pulled hospital records for any recent visits by Claire. Surprisingly, she had been admitted several times over the past few months for minor injuries, each time slipping under the radar. A fractured rib, a severe bruise, stomach pains diagnosed as food poisoning. None of these incidents were reported to the police, or even to Claire's family. They appeared as simple accidents, easy enough to dismiss, but to Mallory, they painted a different picture, one of slow, deliberate harm. The detective started digging deeper, questioning staff who had cared for Claire during those visits. Some mentioned noticing bruises or a guarded look in her eyes, but no one had thought to ask further. Others recalled overhearing tense conversations between Ethan and Lila in hushed tones. A few admitted to feeling uneasy about the pair's closeness, but kept quiet out of fear or loyalty. The hospital's internal email logs revealed frequent communication between Ethan and Lila at odd hours. One message from Lila to Ethan read, "Everything is going according to plan." Another, more chilling, said, "She won't last much longer if this continues." Mallory's suspicion grew. If these two were involved in Claire's disappearance and injuries, what was their motive? Was it an affair gone wrong, a plot fueled by jealousy or greed, or something darker, something that could destroy not just one life but the entire town's fragile trust? The hospital director insisted that the investigation stay separate from patient care, but Mallory pressed on. He spoke with Claire's closest friends and family, learning that the perfect life everyone saw was far from the truth. Claire had confided in a few people about feeling trapped, fearful of her husband's temper and the strange dynamics with the hospital staff. Yet no one had ever imagined the depths of danger she faced. One night, as Mallory reviewed security footage near the ICU, he noticed Nurse Lila entering room 306 multiple times at odd hours, often carrying a small bag or syringe. The footage was grainy but clear enough to raise alarm. What was she doing with Claire during those hours when everyone else was asleep? The detective's instinct screamed that the key to unlocking this mystery lay within the walls of that ICU room, but the truth was slipping through his fingers, hidden behind layers of silence and deception. Meanwhile, Claire remained unconscious, caught somewhere between life and death, unable to speak, unable to defend herself. She was a ghost trapped in her own body, a woman whose secrets would soon shatter the calm surface of Pineville forever. As days passed, the hospital staff grew more guarded. Whispered conversations stopped when Mallory entered a room, and glances were averted. The doctor and nurse who once seemed inseparable now avoided each other in public. The town, once so sure of its heroes, began to wonder, how well do you really know the people you trust the most? Detective Ray Mallory was digging deeper into the tangled web surrounding Claire's mysterious injuries and disappearance. Every new detail he uncovered only added layers to the puzzle, raising more questions than answers. The hospital, once a place of healing, now felt like a fortress of secrets, with walls closing in around him. One of the most baffling discoveries came when Mallory finally got permission to review the medical charts and nursing logs related to Claire's care. At first glance they seemed routine records of injuries, medication dosages, notes on her progress, but as he studied them line by line, something caught his eye: discrepancies in the time certain treatments were given and who signed off on them. The most troubling entries involved the IV drip Claire had been receiving during her latest ICU admission. It was supposed to be a simple saline solution, but the logs showed multiple changes during the night, twice in fact, performed by Nurse Lila Hart. Neither of these changes had been properly documented in the official system. When questioned, Lila insisted she had been following verbal orders from Dr. Ethan Rowe, claiming everything was routine, yet the silence in the records spoke louder than any explanation. Mallory began to suspect the possibility of something far more sinister than an accidental injury or an unfortunate fall. Small doses of poisons, slow-acting drugs that could mimic natural illness or accidents, seemed like the only explanation for Claire's gradual decline over months. The detective's next step was to examine hospital staff schedules. He noticed a pattern. Ethan and Lila's shifts were almost always aligned. Over the past 3 months they had worked more than 30 overnight shifts together. Their constant proximity was no coincidence, yet no one seemed to question the depth of their partnership until now. Mallory tracked down nurses and interns who had worked with Lila during those shifts. Some described her as meticulous, almost obsessively so, but others admitted feeling uneasy around her. There was something about the way she watched the patients too close, one intern confessed, like she wasn't just caring for them but controlling them. When asked about her relationship with Dr. Rowe, several staff members hesitated but eventually spoke of whispered conversations, secret meetings behind closed doors, and an intimacy that went far beyond professional boundaries. But no one could confirm what those conversations entailed. Meanwhile, the hospital administration began to grow nervous about the investigation. They urged Mallory to tread carefully, warning that accusing respected staff without concrete evidence could ruin careers and damage the hospital's reputation. But Mallory was relentless. The deeper he dug, the more he uncovered troubling signs of a hidden pact between Ethan and Lila. Rumors circulated among the staff of an affair, but more alarming were hints of a plan, something that involved Claire in a way no one had imagined. Then came the break Mallory had been waiting for. Reviewing phone records from Lila's personal device, he found a series of encrypted messages between her and a contact saved under a false name. Tracing the number revealed it belonged to Ethan Rowe. The messages were cryptic but chilling. One read, "You said you wanted to be free. I did my part, now it's your turn." Another said, "The risk is high, but it will be worth it." The detective knew these were not just lovers exchanging secret notes, they were conspirators plotting something dangerous. When Mallory confronted Lila with the evidence, her calm facade cracked for a moment. She admitted to the affair but vehemently denied causing Claire any harm. Instead, she pointed the finger at Ethan, claiming he had orchestrated a slow poisoning of his wife to remove her quietly. According to Lila, she helped only because she feared what Ethan was capable of and believed they could escape together afterward. The story sent shockwaves through the investigation. A doctor using his medical knowledge as a weapon, a nurse complicit out of fear and desire. It was a nightmare scenario, but without more proof, the case remained frustratingly thin. Detective Mallory knew the truth was close, hidden in the shadows of hospital halls and whispered secrets. He began to suspect that the real danger wasn't just the poison in Claire's veins, it was the silent pact between two people willing to destroy a life to get what they wanted. As the days passed, the detective prepared for the next move. The hospital's tight walls and hidden corners held the answers, but getting to them would take patience and courage, because in Pineville the line between healer and harm was thinner than anyone dared imagine. The tension inside Pineville General Hospital thickened with every passing day, like a storm about to break. Detective Ray Mallory felt the pressure mounting, not only from the hospital's administration but also from the townspeople, who whispered in hushed tones about the scandal gripping their once trusted medical center. The eyes of the community were now trained on Ethan Rowe and nurse Lila Hart, two people who had once been symbols of care and professionalism, now at the center of a mystery that no one wanted to believe. Claire remained unconscious in ICU. Her body was a map of pain, bruises deepening, and new injuries appearing without explanation. Doctors struggled to explain the sudden worsening of her condition, baffled by symptoms that didn't fit any known disease or injury pattern. Ethan insisted on closely monitoring her himself, though his presence only intensified the unease surrounding the case. Mallory's investigation led him to a chilling discovery in the hospital's pharmacy record. There were unusual requests for specific medications, substances not typically used in ICU care. These drugs had names that suggested they were meant to sedate, disorient or even paralyze patients in tiny, almost undetectable doses. The records showed several doses administered to Claire during her stays, but with no clear medical justification. The trail pointed directly to Nurse Lila, who was often the one administering these drugs. Mallory learned that she had access to the pharmacy's controlled substances, but the hospital's oversight was lax. and many transactions were signed off by her or Ethan without proper verification. Whoever was manipulating Claire's treatment had insider knowledge and power. Mallory dug into Lila's past, hoping to uncover a motive beyond the obvious. He discovered that she had transferred from a big city hospital, under unclear circumstances. Rumors hinted at a disciplinary action related to patient care, but official records were sealed. This raised more red flags. Had she been running from something dark in her past, or was she simply a pawn in a larger game? Meanwhile, Ethan's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Nurses reported seeing him pacing the ICU halls late at night, whispering into his phone with a voice that was rarely steady. His usual calm precision was replaced by sharp outbursts, a flicker of desperation in his eye. Yet he remained fiercely protective of Claire, often refusing to allow other doctors or specialists to intervene. Mallory began to suspect that Ethan's motive was far more complex than jealousy or infidelity. There was something about his actions that hinted at obsession, control, and perhaps a desperate attempt to cover up a secret no one had guessed. One night, a janitor working late overheard a heated conversation between Ethan and Lila behind the ICU door. Though he caught only fragments, the words "finished plan" and "soon" sent chills down his spine. When questioned, both denied any wrongdoing, but the janitor's unease was shared by others who sensed a storm brewing. Determined to break through the wall of silence, Mallory arranged a covert surveillance operation. Cameras were installed in the ICU corridors and medication rooms, focusing on Ethan and Lila's move. What the detective captured over the next week was disturbing. Late-night visits to Claire's room, secretive exchanges of syringes, and brief but intense arguments that ended with Ethan storming away. As the footage was reviewed, an unexpected detail caught Mallory's eye. A shadowy figure slipping into the hospital after hours, someone who didn't belong among the staff. The person wore a hood, moving with practiced stealth. The footage was too grainy to identify them, but their presence added another layer of mystery. Was this stranger connected to Claire's condition? Were Ethan and Lila truly acting alone, or were they part of a larger conspiracy? The hospital grew colder, the halls echoing with unanswered questions. The detective realized that the answers wouldn't come easily. This case was about more than just a missing wife or a troubled marriage. It was about power, trust, and betrayal running deep beneath the sterile walls of a place designed to save lives. As Mallory pieced together the fragments, he knew one thing for certain: someone wanted Claire silent. And to find out who, he would have to confront secrets that could destroy not only the Rowe family but the very heart of Pineville itself. The deeper Detective Ray Mallory ventured into the shadows of Pineville General Hospital, the more tangled the threads became. The hospital's sterile corridors were no longer just pathways for healing. They had transformed into corridors of deception, secrets, and whispered conspiracies. Every step forward seemed to reveal new mysteries, each more unsettling than the last. Claire's condition remained critical. Her body showed no signs of improvement despite the constant care. Some nights, monitors would beep erratically, drawing frantic attention from nurses and doctors. Yet every time an independent specialist was called to consult, Ethan Rowe managed to dismiss their concerns, insisting he had everything under control. His insistence bordered on obsession, and those closest to him noticed the change. The man who once inspired trust, now seemed haunted, consumed by something no one could name. Detective Mallory's surveillance operation uncovered alarming details. Footage showed Ethan and Lila working together with an intensity that went beyond medical necessity. There were moments when their hands brushed over Claire's IV lines, sometimes adjusting, sometimes injecting, always discreet, always precise. But what troubled Mallory most were the late-night conversations they had, filled with tension and urgency. On one such night, the cameras caught something even more disturbing. As Ethan left the ICU, a figure emerged from the shadows of the parking garage, moving quickly and purposefully. Mallory recognized the silhouette immediately. Marcus Hill, a visiting neurologist who had been at the hospital only a few weeks. Hill was well-liked but reserved, someone who kept to himself. Why would he be sneaking around at odd hours? The detective's instincts told him this was a key piece of the puzzle. Marcus Hill's involvement was unexpected and unexplained. Mallory reached out discreetly to question Hill, but the neurologist's answers were vague, defensive, and inconsistent.
He claimed to have been running personal errands after hours, but no one could verify his alibi. Meanwhile, the hospital's atmosphere grew suffocating. Staff whispered about strange occurrences, medications disappearing, records mysteriously altered, and patients suffering inexplicable complications. Some nurses confided to Mallory that they feared retaliation if they spoke out. The hospital's hierarchy seemed to protect certain individuals while silencing others. Mallory focused on the encrypted messages between Ethan and Lila, hoping to decode the secret language. With help from a cyber specialist, he uncovered chilling phrases that hinted at a final step in removing obstacles. The words suggested a calculated plan unfolding, but its goal remained elusive. The detective's breakthrough came when hospital technicians found evidence that Claire's IV line had been tampered with on multiple occasions. The tubing had tiny puncture marks, barely visible but enough to allow dangerous substances to enter her bloodstream slowly over time. This wasn't accidental, it was deliberate sabotage. Confronted with the mounting evidence, Lila's demeanor began to unravel. Under intense questioning, she admitted to injecting Claire with sedatives, but claimed she was coerced by Ethan, who she said was spiraling out of control. Lila spoke of a secret plan to free Ethan from his marriage, though the exact details remained shrouded in fear and uncertainty. The detective wasn't convinced she was simply a victim. Lila's actions were too calculated, her knowledge too precise. She was more than a scared accomplice, she was a key player in a sinister game that had ensnared them both. Then, just as Mallory thought he was closing in, a new twist shook the investigation. Claire suddenly showed signs of waking from her coma. It was faint at first, a flutter of eyelashes, a slight movement of a finger, but enough to send ripples through the hospital. If Claire regained consciousness, the truth would surface. She held the key to unraveling the web of lies. But would she remember, and could she trust anyone around her? The days ahead promised answers but also danger. As the shadows lengthened around Pineville General, one thing became clear. The battle for Claire's life was more than medical. It was a fight for justice, trust and survival in a place where nothing was as it seemed.
Claire's eyes fluttered open for the first time since her mysterious arrival at Pineville General, and the moment felt electric, charged with hope, fear, and a creeping sense of dread. The sterile room, with its hum of machines and faint antiseptic smell, suddenly seemed both a sanctuary and a prison. She was alive, but trapped in a body that felt alien and a mind clouded with fragments of pain and confusion. Detective Ray Mallory arrived early, eager yet cautious. He knew this could be the breakthrough the entire investigation desperately needed. But as he watched Claire's fragile attempts to focus, he realized the road ahead would be anything but simple. Her memory was patchy, the fog in her mind hiding crucial moments. The doctor who had been her husband, the nurse who had cared for her, the stranger lurking in the shadows, all were names and faces she struggled to place. Mallory's questions were slow and deliberate, designed to coax her memory without overwhelming her. He showed her photographs of Ethan and Lila, watching her carefully for any reaction. Claire's gaze faltered when she saw Ethan's picture, a flash of fear, a flicker of recognition that sent a chill through the room. When shown Lila's photo, she looked puzzled but uneasy, as if sensing something was wrong but unable to articulate it. The detective's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and frustration. Claire's silence was not defeat. It was a shield protecting secrets she couldn't yet reveal. Mallory knew that unlocking her memories might unravel the entire dark tapestry that had been woven around her. Meanwhile, Ethan Rowe's behavior grew more erratic. Rumors circulated that he was spending long hours alone in the hospital chapel, his hands clenched tightly in prayer or anguish. Some staff reported hearing desperate sobs echoing through the corridors. But to the outside world, he maintained a facade of concern and professionalism, carefully controlling every interaction with Claire. Nurse Lila Hart became harder to find. She took sudden leaves, cancelled shifts, and avoided contact with colleagues. The once present figure at Claire's bedside vanished like a ghost. Mallory suspected she was hiding or planning her next move. The hospital itself seemed to hold its breath. Hallways that were once bustling now felt eerily quiet. Staff whispered behind closed doors, glancing nervously when the detective entered. The secrets of Pineville General weighed heavily on everyone. One night, Mallory received an anonymous tip. A voice, shaky and disguised, told him to check the hospital's old maintenance tunnels, forgotten passages running beneath the building. The caller hinted that what happened to Claire was part of a larger scheme involving hidden meetings, secret exchanges, and shadowy figures who didn't appear on any official roster. Curiosity piqued, Mallory explored the tunnels under the cover of darkness. The narrow passages smelled of damp concrete and rust. As he moved carefully through the shadows, he discovered a small storage room cluttered with discarded medical supplies and, more disturbingly, vials of unmarked liquid hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The labels on the vials were faded, but Mallory's forensic team later confirmed they contained powerful sedatives and toxins. Someone had been stockpiling drugs meant to harm patients silently and slowly. The implications were terrifying. Claire wasn't the only victim. Mallory's mind raced. Was this the work of Ethan and Lila alone, or was there a wider conspiracy within the hospital's walls? The detective's suspicion deepened that others had been complicit or forced into silence, caught in a web of fear and power. Back in the ICU, Claire's eyes opened wider. For a brief moment, she reached out toward a photo on the bedside table, a family picture with Ethan, herself, and a small boy. The gesture was fragile but filled with meaning. Mallory felt the weight of her silent plea. She needed help, protection, and justice. But danger lurked close. Unbeknownst to Mallory, Ethan was watching from a hidden corner, his expression unreadable but cold. The doctor who had once sworn to heal was now a man desperate to keep his secrets buried, no matter the cost. The story of Claire's survival was no longer just about a missing wife found in ICU. It had become a battle between truth and deception, trust and betrayal, and as the shadows tightened around Pineville General, everyone waiting for answers had to ask themselves, who could really be trusted when the ones sworn to save lives might be the ones to destroy them? The atmosphere inside Pineville General Hospital had shifted. The walls that once seemed to shelter healing now felt like they were closing in, suffocating anyone who dared to seek the truth. Detective Ray Mallory stood quietly in the corridor outside ICU room 306, the steady beep of the heart monitor inside a fragile rhythm echoing through the silence. Claire's slow recovery had sparked a fragile hope, but it also ignited fear that the darkness lurking beneath the hospital's pristine surface was far from over. Mallory knew time was running out. Ethan Rowe, once the town's respected doctor and Claire's husband, was unraveling. His carefully crafted mask was cracking, revealing a man desperate to control the narrative before it spiraled beyond his grasp. Rumors swirled that Ethan had been seen arguing in hushed tones with unknown visitors, shadows moving like ghosts in the hospital's after-hours hall. Nurse Lila Hart had vanished without a trace. No calls, no messages, no explanations. Theories ran wild. Had she fled out of guilt, fear, or perhaps betrayal? Mallory suspected she held pieces of the puzzle that might finally expose the full extent of the dark plan that had put Claire in ICU. But with Lila gone, those answers seemed increasingly out of reach. The detective's investigation had revealed a pattern of calculated cruelty. Claire's injuries were not accidents, they were inflicted slowly and methodically, disguised beneath the facade of medical care. The drugs found in the hidden supply room beneath the hospital confirmed it. Someone had weaponized medicine, turning healing into harm. Mallory's suspicions about Dr. Marcus Hill had deepened as well. The visiting neurologist's late-night movements and evasive answers hinted at involvement far more serious than he admitted. Mallory arranged a covert surveillance operation targeting Hill, hoping to catch him in the act or uncover connections that would explain his mysterious presence. The tension mounted as Mallory pushed deeper, piecing together surveillance footage, phone records, and testimonies from staff too frightened to speak openly. A disturbing pattern emerged. Ethan and Lila were not acting alone. Others in the hospital had been involved, whether out of loyalty, fear, or something darker. One rainy evening, Mallory received an encrypted message from an unknown source. The message contained a single location and a time coordinates leading to a remote cabin outside Pineville, with a warning. The truth is closer than you think, but it comes with a price. Determined, Mallory set out under the cover of darkness. The road to the cabin was winding and slick, the night air thick with fog. When he arrived, the place was deserted, but signs of recent activity were everywhere. Discarded medical gloves, a broken syringe, and a hastily torn notebook filled with cryptic notes and names. As Mallory scanned the area, a sudden noise made him freeze. A car door slamming in the distance, footsteps approaching. He ducked behind a tree, heart pounding. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Lila, her face pale but determined. Without a word she handed Mallory a flash drive. "Everything you need is on here," she whispered urgently, "but be careful, they'll come after you both." The flash drive contained video recordings, messages and documents exposing a horrifying conspiracy, a group of trusted medical professionals using their positions to manipulate patients for profit and power. Claire's case was just one piece in a much larger, darker puzzle. Returning to Pineville, Mallory faced the impossible task of bringing the truth to light while protecting Claire and himself. The hospital administration fought to silence the scandal, and Ethan Rowe's name still held sway in the community. But with Lila's evidence, the detective had what he needed to start dismantling the web of lies. The final confrontation came swiftly. As Mallory prepared to present the evidence to the authorities, Ethan made one last desperate move, attempting to flee the town under cover of. But Mallory was ready. The arrest was swift and decisive, breaking the spell Ethan had cast over Pineville. In the aftermath, Claire's condition improved steadily. She began to remember fragments of the past, moments of fear, pain and betrayal, but also the faint glimmers of hope and resilience. With the hospital's dark secrets exposed, Pineville started to heal too, slowly rebuilding trust where it had been shattered. The story of the doctor and the nurse had a secret, then the wife was found in ICU became a cautionary tale about the dangers hidden beneath trust and the strength it takes to fight for the truth. Detective Mallory's relentless pursuit had uncovered not just a crime, but a chilling reminder that sometimes, the greatest dangers lie in the hands of those sworn to protect us.